Welcome to another episode of the Drew Versa Show. I'm excited to have my guest today, Bobby Umur, on the show. Bobby, how's it going?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Are you staying warm in Canada?
Yeah. I have my igloo out back, and we stay warm. That's a stereotype, but no, we're good.
That's good, eh? I know A is a stereotype too, but I
Hey,
love I love that word. It's wonderful. California,
how
we
about
say
that?
like, you guys say A. It's all good.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
you have a great personal brand on LinkedIn. You're a keynote speaker, a trainer. You've done a lot of workshops. And today we're going to talk about kind of your journey, your career journey, where you're at now, how you got there, and then what you do to tell a wonderful story and build a personal brand.
Well, I mean, I think the general thing I tell a lot of people is that my story was very diverse and vast with different things I did, and I was always feeling kind of lost and stuck. So I started as a mechanical engineer because I was good at math and physics, and I worked as an aerospace design engineer. And while I was there, I was actually bored, and so I started a musical theater company, started producing and directing musicals, grew that organization to about 150 people in about 4 years, and I was like, hey, this is kind of fun. Let me go into film and television. And so then I stopped what I was doing, did my MBA in marketing, and tried to switch careers into film and television. When I got out, I found it very difficult to find a job there. So I took the next best thing, which was brand marketing. Did brand marketing for about 4 years, and again was like, you know what, I'm not feeling this. Like I'm working my butt off, but I'm working for somebody else, and I don't like this. And I finally decided after leaving both those industries to dive into my brand, and I found a path that made more sense for me, which was motivational speaking. And I did that, and I've been doing that for 15 years now. It's been great. Because once you find something that aligns with your values, your personality traits, and things like that, then that's when the magic can really happen. So I was on a roll with that, and then I became an expert in. Initially, I was talking about soft skill leadership type stuff, but then I first became known as an expert in networking and how to connect to people. And then eventually, I became known as the guy who talked about personal branding. And then the third thing I started becoming known for was a social media guy because I started amassing a lot of followers. I had about 500,000 followers across all social media channels, and so that became an area of expertise. And then about 5 years ago, people started saying, you got to get a book. You start a conference. So I started the DYPB conference. They're like, you should have a program. So I started a program. Now I have several programs, some of which have done well, and some of which have not done well, or I've had to evolve because of COVID. And then COVID hit, and then okay, I had my speaking company, and I had DYPB, which was an events in-house training company, and both of them were devastated by COVID because everything was shut down, and so I had to pivot and figure out what I wanted to do. I had about 300 different conversations with people across my network and across industries over about a period of 6 months to really understand what's going on and what they're going through. And I started trying different things, but three things that have come into play. One is storytelling. People really want to tell better stories with their teams, virtual teams, with their LinkedIn content, with their website, with just their friends when they're networking online. They want to tell better stories for themselves and for their companies. The second thing that's come out is that personal branding is still very relevant. So because people are now trying to realign, reposition, start a side hustle, ramp up their brands, ramp up their LinkedIn. So personal branding is becoming something there. And then the third one, which I've always had too, but I'm still working on how I want to manifest it, is just building relationships, because virtually it's a little bit different than the way you would go to a networking event. I was always the networking event guy, right? And so now it's like, how do you create these meaningful relationships and deep conversations, even though it's virtual? How do we do that? And so that's the third thing I'm working on. So
Well,
it's
Bobby,
it's
I have a question
different for
for
me,
you.
but it's fun.
I have
Yeah.
a, I have a question. So, I always joke that networking is a lot like dating, right? I
Okay.
mean, some people like you, some people just absolutely run from you and everything in between.
Yeah.
Tinder figured it out with the online dating and all that. What does that look like for online events, right? I mean, how do you have meaningful conversations when you think about like Bumble, Tinder? I mean, that's literally what you're doing. You're networking for a dating purpose. You're trying to connect with somebody on that. How do you see the space evolving?
Well, I think that one of the things that's really helpful is when you get them on a video call like this, you'll see that we're in each other's homes. And unlike a coffee shop or an office space, it's a very intimate. It's more intimate, and it automatically leads to more deeper conversations. So I think that if you can get them onto a video conference call, it can actually be a really good question or a good connection, because we're going to obviously talk about being at home and working from home, and maybe the dog or the kid will pass by, and it becomes a really, informal and more intimate conversation. That's the one thing. The second thing is, um, connection takes work. And when I did my first TEDx talk, it was about the 5 C's of connection, how to create connection. And one of the biggest things with connection is you have to be able to create the space. And you create the space by sharing your own authentic, vulnerable self and being open about that. I think that creates a little bit of an environment of trust. But the second piece is actually be willing to actually invite people with those more interesting questions. So instead of saying, hey, how's your day? Or how's work? Or what do you do for a living? Ask some of the more meaningful questions, or you invite them, say, listen, I'd like to have a more meaningful conversation with you. Are you open to that for 10 minutes? And when you do that, the right people will come and they'll actually be willing to have those conversations. And I found that's worked really, really well for me. And when I talk to other people, I say, if you're willing to ask that question and create that environment, you can actually have some really powerful conversations.
And you mentioned the 5 C's of connection. So what are your 5 C's of connection?
Well, the 5 C's connection, when I did that TED talk, it was really about, number one is caring. So you have to care about something really genuinely and authentically and with a deep passion. Number two, communications, communicating more proactively, more assertively, more genuinely. And then if you care deeply and you communicate really proactively, you can create what's called a deep and powerful connection. And once you create deep and powerful connection, and you do many of them, then you create deep and powerful communities. And once you have communities that are deep and powerful, that's when you create change. That's the 5 C's.
Beautiful, man. I'm tearing up right here. No, that's awesome, Bobby. And yes, I've seen your TED Talk. So if you are listening after this, go check out Bobby's TED Talk. And on the part of storytelling, let's dig into that. What makes a great story? What makes people want to follow you? How do you build a great story today? There's so much noise. There are so many things competing, from Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. So I think, two-part question. One, how do you make a great story? And then two, where should you focus your efforts as an entrepreneur or a business? Because there are so many places you can tell your story. Where should you focus your efforts?
Well, I mean, storytelling has many different dynamics that make them really powerful, but I think there's a couple of things that people need to keep in mind. Number one, it's really important to know your target audience. Who's the story for? How do they feel? What are their pain points? What are their bliss points? And so when you tell a story, you want to make sure that target that audience in a very branded, focused, and aligned way. If you do that, your stories will have more resonance. That's one thing. The second thing that really comes from the framework of the story. So if you really want to have a story, again, that really is compelling, I think that authenticity, vulnerability, genuineness, that really shines through. I mean, particularly now in the virtual world, we have to break through the clutter, and virtual world also has a little bit of a distrust around it. So if you're willing to be vulnerable and be authentic, be genuine in who you are, and what you're dealing with, what you're going through, sharing your emotions, that really cuts through all that clutter too. And then I think the third thing that really helps, and this goes back to teaching people frameworks, but that first 2 lines, the first 5 seconds are quite important to get someone's attention. If you can do that, that's where it's going to take it to a higher level. And that higher level is really what we talk about as audio, visual, and kinesthetic. What that is you want people to hear the sounds that you're hearing in your story. You want people to visualize what you're seeing in your story. You want people to feel the movement of the story and that they're actually there. And if you can immerse them in that way, that's where stories really take off. Now, when it comes to, for brands and for entrepreneurs, I mean, there's a lot of places where your stories come into play. So, I recommend every single person out there, entrepreneur or not, creates a 3-minute personal story. If you go to my website, you'll see my 3-minute personal story. It's kind of old, but it's still relevant today. But everyone shares a story about who you are, where you come from, what you're about, what your purpose is. But, creating stories, you can have a story that, is on your LinkedIn post, whether it's a video or a text-based post. It can be on your blog site. But it can also be on your website, right? It could be the story of you and how you found the business and the challenge you had. It could be the story of your clients and what they've been through and how they, persevered. It could be a story of your employees or people you work with and partners and, what they loved about that industry or that topic. And so stories are a way for you to, show your humanity, but also build trust with whoever you're trying to build trust with, whether it's a stakeholder or a client or a customer or even an investor. And so that's why storytelling is such a powerful tool that I think everyone should be using.
That's great, Bobby. And then when you're telling your story in media today, you know, there are long stories, right? And then we
Yeah.
see Instagram stories. So there are, you know, the long, more cinematic journey of this is my company, this is my business, this is why we
Hmm.
exist. On the website, maybe a few minutes, and then we see people, you know, sharing every moment of their daily life, the food they eat, the trips they
Right.
take, you name it. Some things that are just I don't want to see, but
Sure.
they're sharing every part of their life in a story. So how do you differentiate when to tell the longer story versus the short story? What are some differences in those
Hmm.
forms of medium?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say that again, it always goes back to your target audience and what you're trying to convey, right? So for me, on Instagram, for example, I tell stories about my business. So if I'm at a conference or I'm on virtual, hey, I'm about to present to this. Here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm a little bit nervous, or oh, so that went well, or oh, I screwed this up, and I talk about that in a very real way. I also talk about my kids. Here we are. Okay, we're going on a hike, or oh my gosh, my son's home because of COVID, and we're dealing with the isolation. And I'll talk about those things because that's my audience likes my business stuff and they also like my family stuff. I don't share what I eat for breakfast because that's not what my audience wants. But the truth is, there are people out there who talk about real estate that I don't really care about. There's people who talk about food, which I don't care about, but they want to talk. They have an audience that they've built for that. So one of the things, the big difference between sharing a long story that's an actual say post versus the Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook stories, those the short pieces is you share that one post that has one main call to action or one kind of main reason why you want to share it. Whereas the stories are more about showing behind the scenes and creating a stronger ROR or return on relationship. People see the real you, they see what you're up to. Back in the day before stories were invented, I would every time I did an event or had a family thing, I always share like a photo and sometimes if I was at like say a wedding, I'd want to show like uh, 5 different photos throughout the day as different posts. And eventually, Facebook and LinkedIn found that really fatiguing. So stories is actually great because it's replaced that. It's allowed me to share, let's say 5, 10 photos or images of what I'm doing in my life. And then I just share one post to encapsulate the whole thing. And I think that's a really good trend. So, I would say the main thing again, the one long story is really to share that one main key takeaway or lesson. Whereas the other smaller stories are really about building relationships and letting people know who you are and they see who you are. And people value having that accessibility to you. They like to have access to you and to showing a quick comment or throwing a quick like. So often when I do the short stories, I'll have a quick, hey, what do you think of this? And some people respond, some people don't. But that's kind of how I use the shorter stories.
Awesome, Bobby. And as far as a catchy headline, we talked about that a little bit earlier. You mentioned it. And how would you take something? Let's say I went and had amazing blueberry pancakes today. How would you turn that into a story?
Well, I mean, you talk about how you don't want to hear about food, but you could take food into a story. I mean, like, if I talk about blueberry pancakes, for example, right? I'll remember the most amazing pancakes I ever had in my life. The first time I had pancakes, and every single thing you do in life has a story. Like this water bottle has a story. This mouse has a story behind it. So if I'm going to talk about blueberry pancakes, I'd want to say, well, what are the 3 things I want people to know about blueberry pancakes? And one could be historical, but another really piece is the emotional. Talk about how it makes you feel, right? When I think of blueberry pancakes, I think of brunch. When I think of brunch, I think of having this great meal with my entire family all spread out there. There's jams, there's fresh bread, there's eggs and pancakes, and my mom and dad are there, and I miss them during COVID. And all of a sudden, it's turning into a visual and hearing and smelling and kinesthetic kind of experience that people can totally relate
I love it. And it's lunchtime in the USA on
to.
my time. So, wow, doesn't that sound wonderful, everybody?
Yeah.
Brunch and Bobby and hanging out and
Yeah.
non-COVID times. Wow, that sounds wonderful.
Someday, sir. Someday.
Okay, all right. When you get out here and I get out your way, yep, sounds
Yeah.
good. So, anything else you want to share with the audience, Bobby? Just little nuggets through your journey, different things that are kind of the key reasons why people work with you.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'll say is that, I found my path because of personal branding. And every time I show up to do a virtual session or I do a coaching session or I show up for a class, and we talk about things like career or business growth, or we talk about creating content, we talk about storytelling, we talk about pivoting during COVID, all these different things, it always comes back to the same thing, which is invest in your personal brand. And the truth is 90% of people don't want to do the work. So a lot of my times, my work with clients, I have to give them shortcuts or frameworks for branding. But I'm like, but I still say, listen, I can give you this framework, but it's not going to be 100% aligned. It's going to be 40, 50, 65% aligned. You need to do the work, the foundational groundwork of self-analysis, self-awareness, feedback mechanisms, online assessments to really truly understand who you are, what your strengths are, how you're perceived, and how to leverage that with your target audience to go to that next level. And if you do that work and invest in your brand, then whether you're looking for that new job or you're looking to grow your business or you're looking to create that digital marketing strategy, then you're going to have more folks in alignment, 85, 95, 90% alignment. And that's when the magic happens. That's when it happens faster. It's more impactful. So for me, investing in my personal brand was a game changer for me. And I think it can be a game changer for other people as long as they're willing to do the work.
There you have it. Bobby, great to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your wealth of information on personal branding today. And
a pleasure.
We'll have you on the next show down the road.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. That's it, everybody. Bobby Ewine. Bobby, how can they check in with you, LinkedIn with you, talk to you, tell their story to you, whatever they want to do with you on the business side? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. You can Google me, but basically on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, it's Rehan Bobby. My website is www.rayallen.com. My personal branding website is dypb.ca. So just follow me there and ask questions anytime you want.
Thank you, Bobby. We are out in the boot. Did I say it right? Is the pronunciation right? Is the pronunciation right?
No, it's oot in the boot.
Oot in the boot. Okay, I am an honorary Canadian.
Sweet.